Hello and welcome to Minter Dialogue, episode number 443. My name is Minter Dial and I'm your host for this podcast, a proud member of the Evergreen Podcast Network. For more information or to check out other shows on the network, please do go visit evergreenpodcast.com. I'd also like to make a shout out and thanks for putting up a 5-star review to this show to Storywork, who did that on Apple Podcasts. This week's interview is with Mosher. Marshall's a world record-holding action sport polyathlete, tech futurist, and host of the Inside the Adventure podcast. He's also the founder and CEO of Vestigo, that builds performance-enhancing experiences that train your team to embrace innovation and navigate change through a mindset of courage. In this conversation with Marshall, we explore his world of adventure sports, the challenge of running up to the edge of one's limits. We look at virtual reality, how it can be used to create meaningful learning experiences for businesses, especially when working remotely. We also look at what the future holds for VR tech. You'll find all the show notes on minterdial.com. Please do consider to drop in your rating and review, and don't forget to subscribe to catch all the future episodes. Now for the show with Marshall. Marshall Mosher, great to have you on this. I see that you are stuck in the middle of nowhere nearby Salt Lake City. It's wonderful to have you. Piped in technology is a wonderful thing, is it not, Marshall? In your own words,
it's great to be here.
How would you like to describe yourself?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on the show. It's a pleasure to be here with you. In terms of describing me, I really love being at the intersection of adventure, technology, and entrepreneurship. If you kind of think of those things as 3 points of a triangle, the closer to the middle of that triangle, the happier I tend to be. So I'm actually, like you mentioned, being in the middle of nowhere in Salt Lake City, streaming in from my remote office camper van at the edge of a paragliding site called Point of the Mountain, where I've been working remotely from here for about a month, being able to get some paragliding training in the morning and evenings, work during the day, and actually train for a big paragliding competition that's starting on Monday. So I'm excited for that.
Excellent. So you are an athlete of many varieties. If you had to, well, you could describe some of the sports that you like to do. What is the thing that connects the sports that you like to practice?
Yeah, so I love all different types of adventure sports specifically. Of course, I did a lot of traditional sports growing up, but there's something about the way that adventure sports gets us outside of our comfort zone with real life consequences in a way that allows us to experience the world in a new way. And the big thing with me, both personally and what I love, as well as what I like to do professionally in my work, is that process of getting outside of the things I'm comfortable with, outside of my comfort zone, trying something new and going through the learning phase. So I really like trying a lot of new sports, getting to the point where I go through the progression of just purely sucking at it, getting to the point where I'm decently good, intermediate, advanced, and then learning something else and kind of constantly being back in that beginner phase to use that as an opportunity to kind of keep pushing my comfort zone. And of course, that's what I love doing with my profession as well, and building virtual reality adventure experiences to help teams practice getting outside of their comfort zone and how that relates to leadership development and team building. But that's sort of the general theme. But in terms of the sports that I love, probably the most, paragliding, kiteboarding, and whitewater kayaking are probably my 3 favorite at the moment, with paragliding and kiteboarding being the ones I've really focused on over the past year. I guess the common theme there is riding the wind, and I really love aviation.
So in your bio, I was reading that you are a world record holder. How describe to us the world record?
Yeah, so I've got a couple silly world records. First person to foot launch a paraglider with a unicycle. That's a fun one. But one of the ones I'm more proud of is the maximum, or the largest number of paragliding flights in a single day. So the way that is really the only way that that's broken is with a paramotor. So you have 2 kinds of paragliding. You have free flight paragliding, where all you have is your wing or glider above you. Those terms are kind of interchangeable, and yourself, and you ride the rising updraft of wind called a thermal, or if you have wind blowing into an object and it rises, it's mechanical lift. And then you have a motor, where you've probably seen videos of someone with a glider above them and a big fan looking thing on their back. Well, with the motor, you can take off, do a circle, land, put your wing down. That counts as one flight, and then keep doing that pretty much all day to rack up as many flights as you can possibly get. So that's
Touch and goes
that's the
almost.
other one, right? And me and my instructor are actually trying to break the record again and try to hit 1,000 in a single day. So we'll
Love
see if
it.
we can do that.
Well, we share a couple of things in these last few comments. The first is I tried to set a world record with a team, but it was something I certainly not going to publicize, and we weren't recognized for it. So, but we tried to do a lot of silly things to get on the record books. And then the other thing which we share is I've practiced 31 different racket sports. And what was fun for me has not been about being great at any of them or breaking world records for that matter, but always figuring out what is interesting in that sport. What is the challenge? And in rackets, it's more about, where do you hit the ball, what stroke, and all that kind of, and how do you win points, and so on and so forth. And so it's sort of similar in terms of diving into what is the mojo, what is the thing that turns you on and makes it happen in that sport.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's different for different sports, but really tapping into that flow state feeling of heightened peak performance when you really get into the zone. That's one of my favorite kind of pieces of kind of commonalities of different sports that you tend to get in pretty much everything if you get to that point.
So I want to talk about breaking comfort zones, and you're obviously a robust athlete, able to do things with your body that a lot of people aren't. But I wonder how you, Marshall, have had experiences as you sort of do this and you start talking about it, how sometimes you're like, oh my God, what am I doing? Have there been moments like that where you actually legitimately put into question, what on earth am I doing in this situation? And how did you overcome that type of fear if it happened?
Yeah, for sure. I think that the bar of those types of situations, is constantly increasing with experience and skill level. Of course, like for instance with paragliding, someone might have that thought the first time they launch their paraglider by themselves and get in the air and realize, wow, I'm by myself up here and no one's going to get me down but me. And then as you get more confident and comfortable, that bar kind of changes. But one of the ones recently for me was this advanced paragliding course called an SIV, which is a French acronym for Incident in Flight. Usually a lot of advanced pilots do this at least on an annual basis, but it's this course where you're with an instructor. You have a big lake and a boat and a tow rig that actually pulls you up into the air a few thousand feet, usually about 4,000 or 5,000 feet. And then you detach from the tow rig, and the instructor is sitting on the boat with binoculars and a radio, and they are telling you what to do to manipulate your wing in a way that you would hope it never does, to practice how to recover from that.
Mm-hmm.
And the first SIV is a very common, terrifying experience for almost every pilot, because it's the first time you're ever in these situations. You're pretty much stopping your wing from flying in the air, and without really knowing what to do. It's pretty scary. So first time I did that was about 6 months ago, and I did one of the maneuvers incorrectly and got into what's called riser twist. And I posted it on social media for anyone who's interested in seeing. But essentially, you fully stall the wing, practice this thing called full stalls, and then instead of doing it correctly, mine twisted up. It was only the third time I'd ever done it, so of course I was doing it wrong, or at least not very good. And it just started twisting. And then when the wing is twisted relative to where you are, there's nothing you can do. Your brake inputs, the lines are all twisted with the other lines, so they don't do anything. So it just gets locked into this, what's called a nose down spiral. kind of maneuver where you're spinning out of the air uncontrollably, pulling a lot of G's. There's nothing you can do. I had to throw my reserve, but I threw it poorly. So I actually ended up falling into the thing that's supposed to save me from that environment, and I was all twisted up in my reserve lines. I had to kind of crawl out of that, get it above me, and eventually it deployed correctly and slowed me down. But I was only about 1,000 feet over the water at that point. And that was definitely one of those situations where I was thinking that for sure. But the important thing from kind of a learning perspective in what we're talking about, kind of with mindset and getting outside of our comfort zone, is I was so tempted to, and this was the second day of a 3-day course, by the way. I was so tempted to just call in sick the next day. Be like, I'm not feeling great. I don't know if I could get back
I
up
have a
there,
thing.
but
I have a thing.
I got this thing I got to go to. Sorry. So I had to make a decision and say, if I don't get back up there tomorrow and do the exact same maneuver again and practice it correctly, then I might never do it and be permanently scared. So I had to get back up, do the same thing. I did it correctly and didn't mess up the next time. But it's less about what happens to us and more about, I think, our reaction to it and our ability to push through that fear. That is the important piece for me.
Absolutely. And yet I'm also thinking, because there's Marshall, the adventurer, and then there's Marshall, the guy who runs Vestigo and does this with companies and so on. But as an individual in doing what you do, I was talking to somebody who free dives over 50 meters, which mind boggles me. People who can hold their breath for
My
5,
record
7.
is only 20 meters.
There you go. I
mean, 20.
So right, and she was saying, well, there aren't many free dive world record holders alive because they always go one step too far, and so the point is, knowing all the same your limits and avoiding that extra adrenaline rush, the kick that you're always trying to get to when you're in adventure. And so how do you deal with that limit? What's the narrative in Marshall's mind when he's tackling, where is my limit? 20 meters, 21? Can I not do 25?
Yeah, that's a great question. When you're pushing the edge, eventually you're going to find it, which is a pretty common, common quote. So it's one of those things where I try and know my limits and practice my limits in as safe of an environment as possible. So, like for instance, to use a whitewater kayaking analogy, because I haven't talked about that yet, there's two types of rapids. There's one that looks really big and scary, but is actually safe. And then there's one that looks really big and scary, but there's a lot of things going on underneath the water where if you come out of your boat for whatever reason, there's a high likelihood that you get stuck in some underwater feature and drown. So you can always, and they both might be the same skill level to paddle it, but one has much higher consequences. So I do try and push my limits in environments where the consequence of failure of finding that limit is minimized, instead of the environments where the consequences is much higher. Doing these maneuvers in the paraglider in a course like an SIV course is another example of being able to find those limits of what you can do and what the glider can do in as safe of a condition as possible, where the odds are stacked in your favor. You're over water. You have a life vest on. If you have to throw your reserve, you're going to come down in the water. You're not going to get hurt. Even if for whatever reason you don't throw your reserve and you're not free falling, you still land in the water, so it's a softer landing. And obviously much better than having something like that happen over trees or over hard ground. So there's different ways to still be able to push those limits, but in a safer way.
The smarter way. So
Right.
I wanted to get just in terms of your background, Marshall, you also attended the Singularity University. So I was wondering, how would you like to describe your experience at Singularity? And do you think it's something that everyone should do or anyone can do? Or maybe more specifically, who should attend Singularity in your mind?
Yeah, Singularity was one of the most impactful programs that I've ever done for sure. I absolutely loved it, and the organization as a whole has constantly been changing and evolving since when I went through it. So the program that I did doesn't exist in the form that I did it in. Um, so I can't talk to their new programs, but I know that they are trying to make it more accessible and more scalable for a larger audience of people. Because the program that I did was a once a year 10-week program for 80 people, from all over the world. I think we had 40 or 42 different countries represented between the 80 people, so extremely international, which was amazing. But 80 people once a year is not a lot of people that can go through the program. Highly impactful, one of the most incredible things I've done. But I think Singularity wanted to make it more accessible for a larger group of people. So I can't speak to the new programs, but the program that I did was incredibly transformational for both me personally and my career trajectory. At the time, I had just graduated from the University of Georgia, where I was originally studying to go to med school. I did biology, psychology, and economics major, really not knowing what I wanted to do, but with the plan to go to med school and realizing that I didn't love hospitals about halfway through that program. So that's why I added the econ component, thinking I might want to go
Hmm.
into business. And then I actually ended up doing a master's in public administration with a healthcare focus, and a lot of things that I realized I didn't want to do after doing it. But fortunately, we have this really amazing state scholarship that covers higher education if you're a Georgia resident. So it was free at least. But by the end of the 6 years of doing three majors and a master's, and we're still not really knowing what I wanted to do. I took an entrepreneurship class the very last semester of my
Hmm.
master's program that helped me to realize that that was the space that I really loved. And then Singularity was a great opportunity to build on top of that. At the time, the University of Georgia actually sent one graduate student from across all of the graduate programs to Singularity, representing the University of Georgia every single year. And it was this kind of competition style scholarship. And I was lucky enough to get selected for that, go to Singularity. And that was really the first time that I got to be immersed in the amazing tech and future focused area that is Silicon Valley, with these incredible people that are leading all these different industries, coming and being guest lecturers for us. And it was also where I kind of discovered virtual reality. We got a chance to go to the Stanford VR lab, learn a bit more about what virtual reality would eventually become. And that was where the idea for what we're doing with Vestigo was originally born, in being able to utilize the first type of technology that can actually scale the impact of experiences that the world has ever seen, and use that for a bunch of different great benefits. But the main niche that we wanted to focus on was for remote team building and leadership development, being able to engage teams that were not physically together in person, and be able to build the same type of camaraderie, connection, relationships, and leadership development skills that you can do in person, but for remote teams. Since we kind of saw the trend of virtual reality increasing, as well as the trend of remote teams, and saw a big opportunity with a big impact in that space. And Singularity was the launching point for that.
Hmm. All right, so let's start by, before we get into Vestigo itself, talking a little bit about your viewpoint, your 36,000 feet vantage point on corporate culture, and what is the problem that Vestigo is solving in this regard?
Yeah, there's a couple problems generally with corporate culture across all teams, regardless of whether they're in person or remote. Tends to be a bit of a lack of innovation, especially for larger companies that are more established and less startup tech focused. So the ability to be innovative, it really comes down to some key psychological factors, which there's a lot of pieces to it, but ultimately it boils down to your willingness to take a risk. And your willingness to take a risk is directly related to your willingness to get outside of your comfort zone and to navigate the unknown and be willing to fail. So there's a lot of psychological pieces around getting outside of your comfort zone, surrounded by what you control, be willing to navigate that unknown factor and the fear of the unknown. And we can actually help teach that psychologically and emotionally through adventure sports, which sounds like it's completely unrelated, but the key basic psychological factors are the same. For instance, when in a real life adventure experience, if you're going rock climbing or rappelling, it's very physically easy but mentally challenging because of that fear of heights. The fear of heights is a really powerful mental component that you can push through, and then being able to train your body just like you can train your muscles at a gym to overcome that natural biological fear of heights, can translate into overcoming other fears, especially the fear of the unknown, and being willing to take more risks in the innovation process. So we try and connect the two both through traditional leadership development, curriculum, and facilitation, but also an experience that actually creates the emotional response that we can link to the content that we teach. And we used to do that with in-person experiences before virtual reality was quite ready yet. And now we do that solely with virtual experiences where we replicate some of the world's most daunting and incredible adventure environments in virtual reality, where we can still create the same emotional response and the same ability to push through that emotion, even though you're not physically there in person.
So in recap, there's this notion of the difficulty of innovation and the fear of failure. These are the two things that you're really trying to solve with Vestigo.
Exactly.
Right. And so let's talk about how to create an experience that helps satisfy that. So when because I mean, let's say, let's jump off a precipice into a pool 30 meters below. Oh, yeah. So we got the fear of heights. All right. Whatever the experience, how do you craft an experience that is able to then to transfer into a team that actually, let's say Monday through Fridays, to use an abstract term, is working on making better carrots or whatever, some other thing, and they're worried about the innovation or whatever. Here we are, we're on the top of a precipice, or you're creating your experience. How do you craft the experience that's transferable to make those better carrots from Monday to Friday?
Yeah, so it really doesn't matter what the company is doing. The basic things that we're teaching kind of go deeper than what the company is doing, and touch on the core kind of psychological problem that any industry, regardless of what they do, does. So it's similar to if you had a keynote speaker come into a company to get everyone hyped up and excited, but instead of just leaving the audience with some general inspiration, giving the audience the chance to actually put that inspiration into practice and practice those themes psychologically and emotionally yourself. So for instance, the experience always has to start with a story. And one of the main ones that we created is this Everest crevasse crossing experience. So we kick it off with, to describe what the environment looks like. Everyone is in their own physical space somewhere, whether it's an office or a house or anywhere, in a VR headset, teleported into base camp at Mount Everest. And everyone is interacting as virtual avatars. So at base camp, we added this big screen, a projector screen like at a conference, and we have a mountaineer who's actually climbed Everest give the kind of kickoff keynote, just like you would at a conference, about their journey up Everest and the challenges that they had along the way, and how that links to certain themes that we want to discuss in the experience. A lot of times the story involves the Khumbu Icefall, which is the very first piece of climbing Everest. It's crossing this big glacier, and that's what the next part of the experience is. So after the speaker finishes with this very empowering, exciting speech, leaves everyone with the key themes, but actually gives them a chance to practice those themes by then teleporting everyone in the audience into the first step in climbing Everest, crossing that Khumbu Icefall glacier. And the way you get across these glaciers and the crevasses in these glaciers, the big cracks in the ice, is with these ladders they put across these big fissures and crevasses in the ice, and you have to walk across those ladders. So functionally, what the audience then gets a chance to do is you're just walking in a straight line on your living room floor, your office floor, but it feels like you are walking across this ladder spanning this 200-foot deep crevasse that if you fall, you're going to fall to your death. And it creates the same emotional reaction that the speaker was talking about just moments before in their speech, that was inspiring the audience to be able to push past their perceived limits, get out of their comfort zone. But now you actually get the chance as the audience to then put that into practice, because you're feeling the same emotions that the speaker was then just describing. So once you feel those emotions, your logical part of your brain kind of shuts down. Your emotional part of your brain tells you, why am I doing this? This is stupid. And then we help people practice pushing through that, getting across, using the support of their teammates who are on the other side cheering them on, as well as their own ability to take another step on their living room floor, which we keep reminding them is perfectly safe. And when they get to the other side, you feel this sense of empowerment, even though you were never in any physical danger. And that emotional connection of a challenge, pushing through the challenge, and the empowerment on the other side turns the message of the speech into something that was about someone else and is now about you. So from a memory standpoint, it solidifies it that much stronger. And then we do a little bit of a debrief to connect the themes of the speech back to the emotions you felt. And when you walk away from it, it's similar to the impact of a really powerful keynote speech, but way more sticky and impactful because it was applied to you directly with an actual emotional reaction. So it doesn't necessarily matter what the company is building. You walk away with this renewed sense of empowerment to be able to maybe make that big process change you were scared to make before, scared your boss would get mad at you for messing up, or whatever that fear that is directly relevant to the thing you do at your company is. You have a little bit more firepower to be able to reassess that fear and push through it.
I love the fact that you set this up, Marshall, as creating a story. I've done maybe 100 VR experiences myself, and it strikes me that crafting that story is so important. And it's even better the way you describe it, where you have the Sherpa or whoever the climber who has actually done the real thing. So it's immediately projecting you into the reality of it, and then you create this experience, which is such the best form of learning, because we all know that experience is the best teacher. So I think that it's a phenomenal process that you put through. The question then I have is, how do you integrate that into the situation at work? So, I'm worried about my boss not being able to do that. This shared experience, how do you move from this VR experience to a in office or remote, for that matter, working through the fears and the issues, let's say with innovation or whatever?
Yeah, so there's definitely ways that we're working on consistently following up, doing multiple experiences, and rechecking in on those themes. But the way that we directly integrate it into the main experience is we're all together as a team of, usually about 20 to 50. 50 is the maximum amount of people we can have in one virtual environment from a technical limitation standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say we have a team of 50. Everyone will be together in Basecamp, listening to the keynote, and together in that group, just like you were at a conference room. But when we go into the activity part of the experience, into the crevasse crossing, we break everyone up into groups of 5. So each group of 5 has their own facilitator and has their own experience, their own version of the crevasse that they get to cross. So you get the luxury of this small group of people with a facilitator that's guiding that group through the experience. And we can be a little bit more personalized in terms of the facilitator asking really targeted, powerful facilitation questions that hopefully get that group of 5 people to open up and share what the crevasse represents in the challenges that they have, both in work and sometimes in life in general. And then we can have a discussion around the similarities of being able to cross that crevasse in virtual reality, and being able to cross the crevasse of whatever challenge that person had brought up and linked to the experience. So we can associate visually the crevasse in people's minds with the challenge, and lead a little bit of a small group discussion around how it links together and being able to overcome that. And then when we come back together, after the crevasse, we're teleported back to base camp. Everyone's in the big group of 50 again. And then people can share, individual groups can share the things that were most powerful from a takeaway perspective from them, and do a bit of a giant group debrief facilitation as well before finishing up. So we try and have the best of both of the large group setting and the small group settings to be able to have some of those more specific discussions.
That is phenomenal, Marshall. I'm living it as you speak through this, and I'm imagining the power of that facilitation. What, in my experience, I've seen is that when you do as you used to do, the live experiences, and jumping off a precipice into a pool 30 meters below, that is there's truly a life threatening danger in that one, which we are going up against, like you were explaining in your situation where you got all tangled up and spiraling out of control, which that must give heart palpitations at another level. Yet, as you and I were talking beforehand, and as I know, that experience in VR can make your heart palpitate oh so much, and the sweaty palms and all that. I remember many situations like that. One of the things that I feel is powerful in what you're doing is there's so many people that are disengaged at work. They're just doing the thing. And by allowing people to have a raw experience where they're actually saying, I am shit scared of heights, or I am worried about tarantulas, or whatever my phobia might be. And expressing that, which is deeply personal, in a professional space is sort of what you're getting at.
Exactly. Yeah, it really does personalize the experience and the challenge in a way that oftentimes isn't brought up in the workforce. I think a lot of times there is a bit of a lack of vulnerability and a willingness to bring up those personal challenges, which directly impacts our ability to do our work as well. So there's definitely a component of some of Brene Brown's work on vulnerability and bringing out some of those the willingness to share some of those personal challenges and phobias and incorporating that into the conversation for sure.
I've had a lot of experience talking to veterans of war, and one of the things that certainly came out of that is that there's a stiff upper lip component to dealing with shit. And when it comes to manning up, if you will, to use obviously a masculine idea, when you're up against a big issue, a big enemy, you don't have much time for or place for vulnerability. Yet, I understand when you talk to the SEALs, who are those band of brothers that have, or band of teammates, to be a little less limiting in gender, to go through those things. Actually, the best teams are the ones that actually have expressed vulnerabilities to one another. Is that something that you are specifically trying to foster, even in the hardest core teams, and very efficiency, effectiveness, performance-based people, and allowing them to have that specifically from the top down?
Of course. Yeah, definitely. And it's not always an easy thing, like you mentioned, when you have teams that are a bit more hard and not kind of willing to let their guard down. But it's definitely something we encourage, and we always recommend that the leader of the organization is the first one to exhibit that, display that, and that kind of gives everyone else a bit of unspoken permission to also share that it's they feel the same way. It may be challenging for them too, or they may be feeling this way or that they wouldn't have shared before. And if we can get leadership to do that first, it makes it much easier for everyone else to follow suit.
Something I caught in one of your podcasts as I was preparing for our chat was you said that fun means sustainability. Really thinking about when you're doing these activities, there's also an element of entertainment.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, there is a component of leadership development and team building that immediately gets people um, kind of on their guard and not really excited. The typical, oh man, we're gonna go do a ropes course trust fall again with our team. Uh, you know, it's gotta be fun and it's gotta be engaging first for those sustainable outcomes to have the ability to happen and present themselves. I really believe in experiences that aren't just impactful, but that are also fun. And the fun element creates a higher level of impact because of the higher level of buy-in and excitement from the people that are going through it.
So with regard to these VR experiences and what you're doing at Vestigo, how do you improve remote teams? Is there something specific or another story that you do that allows for remote teams to work better? Give us a little bit the angle of how to improve remote work.
Yeah, so all of these ones that I've described are actually both for remote teams and in-person teams. It works especially well for remote teams because everyone is physically in a separate, distant environment that's not together. Sometimes they haven't even met their coworkers. So the ability to be able to interact with the people they've talked to, virtually in a way that feels like you're in the same space in virtual reality. It really does feel like you were looking at a person that's making facial expressions and hand gestures, and you feel like you're together in person in a way that you haven't felt because of the remote component of your team. It adds another dynamic of impact from the relationship building side. But most, and sorry if I didn't clarify this before, most teams we work with are remote teams. That's really
Oh,
the
I
the
see.
big opportunity for us, in the sense that in-person teams do have the luxury of being able to get together in person and do some of these types of activities in the real world, which creates that same level of impact. Remote teams don't have that luxury. So virtual reality is really their only solution unless they want to fly everyone together in person. So that's really the main focus for us, being able to create these opportunities for remote teams or for hybrid remote teams where some people are together and some people aren't.
When you are doing the brief with a client, let's say the CEO of a remote team or whomever, what's the component that's going to make this the most successful in that conversation with the CEO or the head of HR, whomever you got in front of you? What do they need to have in terms of the right mindset for this to be successful?
Yeah, well, the first thing in terms of when we're talking to a company before we started the experience and working with the CEO or the head of HR or L&D, um, the first thing that they have to understand is how virtual reality works. And a lot of
Mm,
people have not tried the latest VR headsets. If you've tried a VR headset 2 or 3 years ago, then you haven't tried a VR headset. Like, it's that
mm,
different. It's not like a
mhm,
smartphone a couple years ago and a smartphone now, and it's
mm.
completely complete. It's like comparing a suitcase phone from like the 80s to an iPhone. It's just completely different and so much better. So the first thing that we do is we actually ship out a VR headset to kind of the main decision maker, or a couple people on the team, so that we can all meet in virtual reality. So we can actually have a bit of a demo of the experience and have our meeting together in VR in the same way that we would with the actual team. And that's usually the first big kind of aha moment that people have who have not tried the latest VR, in being able to see what's possible with it. So that's the first step. But the next step is a general understanding of what their team needs, and what themes we want to instill in the teams. We can use the same experiences to teach different themes in different ways based on the story we tell and the way we connect the dots. So we do really like working with very observant and aware leaders who know that our team has an issue with communication, or our team just will not take a risk. Like, they having insight into what exactly
Mm.
is the specific thing we need to work
The
on with the team
crevice.
is
Hmm.
extremely helpful. Right. What that crevice is, if they're just like, we just want a chance for everyone to get together, that's fine. It's just not going to be quite as impactful because we don't know what that main problem is with the team, and we're just sort of taking a shot in the dark.
So how many experiences do you have? I mean, I'm guessing you have more than just the Everest experience.
Yeah, so we have three main experiences, but the Everest one is the first experience where everyone is together in a virtual environment. The other experiences, we can't have everyone together. We have a
Uh-huh.
few people together in different rooms. Then we use Zoom to bring everyone together if we have a larger team. Whereas Everest is the first one where we can actually, it's the first one that we actually developed in-house that allows everyone to be together in the same environment. Whereas to give an example of some of the other ones, we've got some experiences that teach communication under pressure really well with this bomb defusal experience
Huh.
that is it's only what's called a single player experience. So only one person is in the headset at a time and the rest of the team is on Zoom. So let's say we have 50 people for this company. Well, we would everyone would still have their own headset, but we'd break everyone up into Zoom rooms, breakout rooms of 5 people each, and then only one person would put on the headset at a time. That person sees this time bomb in front of them with all these buttons and wires, but no idea what to do. And then the other 4 people have access to the instruction manual, and it's
Mm.
their job to decode the instruction manual, figure out what the person on the headset is seeing, and tell them the right instructions on how to decode it. And then each person gets a chance to be the diffuser in the hot seat in VR, but we rotate through that. And then each team is a bit of a competition against the other teams to see who can get the fastest time. But we do have to use Zoom as the main connection tool, even though VR is still the experiential tool. So some are a little bit different, but we've got about 3 or 4 different ones.
Well, really, with VR, your scope of possibilities is so much bigger relative to doing in real life, where we actually have to deal with legal ramifications if somebody slips and breaks a leg or something. I
Exactly.
mean, I suppose you still have the risk of someone having a heart attack because of the reality of the virtual situation. So you were talking about the changes in VR, and I haven't had an experience in 2 years, so I'm thinking now I haven't done VR, despite having done a lot before. Characterize where we are and what will be the future of VR. Where are we in the developments of VR? Because obviously you're at the forefront.
Yeah, so a really great book and movie to watch to give a good sense for what the future of VR could look like is Ready Player One. Fantastic
Oh
book,
yeah.
really good movie. Steven Spielberg came out a few years ago. Highly recommend watching that and reading the book, which is even better, of course. That's a good portrayal of what the future of this tech could look like. We're not quite there yet, but we're getting close. So the big challenge with virtual reality historically has been having a headset that doesn't require an external computer to process the graphics. Up until about 2 or 3 years ago, the only real virtual reality headsets needed to have an external computer that was physically plugged into it to power the graphics. And a lot of headsets had to have these sensors in the 4 corners of the room
Mm-hmm.
called lighthouses to be able to pick up where you are. Now, all of that stuff is baked into the headset itself. The sensors are on the outside of the headset, processing power is all in the headset. All you need is a space to be able to move around in, yourself and the headset, and that's it. So because the transition from computer powered to mobile was so important, they did sacrifice a little bit on the quality. So the quality of the mobile headsets is not up to par of the quality of the PC powered ones, but it's made it so much more accessible to 99% of the audience who doesn't know how to buy a big gaming computer and hook it up and install these lighthouses, and they just need to have a device to put it on. So that's kind of where we are now. And now that mobile device is getting better and better and better to the point where it's eventually going to be as good and eventually better than the computer processed ones, probably through 5G technology. So being able to offload the processing power into the cloud on much more powerful computers and stream it to the headset with super low latency, so to the point where you can't tell that there's any type of delay. That will be the big game changer for mobile headsets that have the ease of use, but the processing power of the really advanced ones. And then eventually, omnidirectional treadmills will kind of be the next thing that creates the next level of immersion. Right now, you can't really run around in virtual reality, at least not very far, without running into your wall, unless you have a big warehouse to move around in. So having these omnidirectional treadmills where you're stationary, but it feels like you're actually running, you're in this harness, in this bowl-shaped treadmill that moves in all directions, that'll be kind of the next game changer for movement in virtual reality. And then as it gets better and better and better, it starts becoming indistinguishable from real life. And that's when we get to the level of the Matrix, if we ever get there, and that kind of thing. Some people actually have the argument that we're already in a simulation because the probability that we've already created it is higher than the probability that we're just about to create it. But that's a whole nother conversation.
Well, beautiful. I did the experience of being buried, as in died and being buried, with a VR set. And to make it interesting, they did it mixed, where you have a mud or earth that actually is thrown on top of you.
Oh, wow.
So you see it, you feel it. And when you combine these sensations, boy, does it feel, even realer. And so I've enjoyed people who are crafting stories where you can feel the wind. For example, you know there's a lot of wind, but you're not being pushed back. So they have a big fan to push you, or you're put in a swing of a parachute, and you're dangling, and so you're getting closer and closer to that real feeling by having physical components to make it mixed. And I think it's awfully powerful. Great souvenirs. Marshall, our time is up. I feel like just beginning, damn it. So wonderful to have you on, Marshall. I really appreciate it. I would love for people to go and check out what you're doing with this, bringing real experiences into the corporate space. So what would be the best way for people to get in touch with you guys, find out what you're up to, sign up, and maybe even follow you? Because I know you have quite the Instagram following.
Of course, yeah. Well, people can definitely reach out to me personally on Instagram at Marshall Mosher. And of course, they can go to our website, which is vestigo.co, just .co. Either way, reach out, shoot me a message. I'm more than happy to help and answer any questions, whether it's virtual reality, adventure related, or both. And thanks so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having listened to this episode of the Minter Dialogue podcast. If you like the show and would like to support me, please consider a donation on patreon.com/MinterDial. You can also subscribe on your favorite podcast service. And as ever, rating and reviews are the real currency for podcasts. You'll find the show notes with over 2,000 and more blog posts on minterdial.com. Check out my documentary film and 4 books, including my last one, You Lead, How Being Yourself Makes You a Better Leader. And to finish, here's a song I wrote with Stephanie Singer, A Convinced Man.
I like the feel of a stranger tucked around me, precipitating the danger to feel free. Trust is the reason, still I won't toe the line. I sit here passively, hope for your respect, anticipating the thrill of your intellect. Maybe I tell myself there's no use in me lying. I'm a convinced man, building an urge. I'm a convinced man, to live and die submerged. A convinced man, in the arms of a woman. I'm I'm a convinced man, challenge my fate. I'm a convinced man, competition's innate. A convinced man, in the arms of a woman. Despise revenges and struggle with deceit. Live for the challenge so life's not incomplete. What's wrong with challenge? I know soon we all die. I like the feel of a stranger tucked around me, precipitating the danger. To feel free, trust in my reason, and let me show you why. I'm a convinced man, practicing my lines. I'm a convinced man, here in these confines. A convinced man, in the arms of a woman. I'm a convinced man, admit to the test. I'm a convinced man, I'm ready for an arrest. I'm a convinced man, in the arms of a woman.